You wake up to shouting in the street. At first you think it's just another small fire. Chicago has them all the time. Someone runs past your window yelling one word, "Fire!" You step outside and immediately see it, a massive orange glow rising above the rooftops. The wind is strong tonight, too strong, and in this city, almost everything is made of wood. Wooden houses, wooden sidewalks, wooden warehouses, wooden rooftops. You suddenly realize something terrifying. If the fire reaches your street, there may be nowhere left to run. Because in Chicago, 1871, one spark can destroy the entire city. To understand why surviving the Great Chicago Fire was so difficult, you first have to understand the city itself in 1871. Chicago is one of the fastest growing cities in America. Railroads connect it to farms, mines, and factories across the Midwest. Ships arrive through the Great Lakes carrying lumber, grain, and coal. Every week, new families arrive looking for work and opportunity. But the speed of this growth creates a dangerous problem. The city is being built faster than anyone can properly plan it. Most buildings are constructed from cheap timber because wood is abundant and easy to work with. Lumber from the forests of Michigan and Wisconsin arrives constantly by train and ship, feeding an endless demand for construction. Entire neighborhoods rise in weeks. Houses are wooden, stores are wooden, warehouses are wooden, even many sidewalks are made from wooden planks raised above the muddy streets. Behind homes sit barns filled with hay for horses, stacks of firewood for winter, and sheds packed with coal and supplies. Fences connect properties from yard to yard, creating continuous lines of dry timber across entire blocks. During a dry season, all of it becomes dangerously flammable. Chicago doesn't just contain wooden buildings. In many ways, the entire city itself is made of wood. The summer of 1871 had been unusually dry across much of the Midwest, and Chicago felt the effects every single day. For weeks, almost no rain fell over the city. The ground hardened under the heat. Grass in empty lots turned yellow, and dust constantly drifted through the streets whenever wagons passed by. But the real danger was not the dust. It was the wood. Chicago in the 1870s was built largely from fresh-cut timber, and after months of dry weather, those wooden buildings began to lose every bit of moisture they once held. Houses, barns, fences, sidewalks, even rooftops slowly dried under the sun until they behaved almost like kindling. Small fires were already happening across the city. In fact, firefighters had been called to dozens of blazes during the weeks leading up to October. Most were contained quickly: a burning shed, a warehouse accident, a chimney fire. But every incident left the fire brigades more exhausted than before, and every fire proved something dangerous. The city was extremely vulnerable. Yet despite these warning signs, daily life continued normally. People believed Chicago had always survived its fires, but what few realized was that the city had quietly become the perfect environment for a catastrophe. Dry wood, dense buildings, and the one thing that could turn a small fire into an unstoppable inferno: wind. Late in the evening of October 8th, 1871, Chicago is settling into an ordinary Sunday night. The streets are quieter than usual. Many people are already at home after a long day of work and church services. Lamps glow behind windows, horses stand in their stables, and the city slowly prepares for sleep. But in a small barn behind a house on DeCoven Street, something goes wrong. Inside the barn, hay is stacked high, wooden beams support the roof, and the entire structure has been dried by months of hot weather. All it takes is a single spark. Within moments, flames begin climbing the wooden walls. At first, the fire seems small. A few neighbors notice smoke and shout warnings. Buckets of water are brought quickly, and people rush to help, believing the fire can still be contained. But the conditions that night are dangerous. A strong wind is blowing across the city. As the barn begins to burn, the wind pushes sparks high into the air. Glowing embers drift across nearby fences and rooftops. Within minutes, another building catches fire, then another. The flames spread faster than the neighbors expected. Wooden fences ignite. Sheds behind nearby houses burst into flames. The fire jumps from yard to yard, feeding on dry timber and stacked hay. Soon the entire row of buildings is burning. The sky above the neighborhood turns orange, and smoke begins rising high into the night. Residents run into the streets shouting warnings. What started as a single burning barn is now becoming something far more dangerous. Because once the fire reaches the tightly packed wooden houses of Chicago, there will be almost nothing left to stop it. If you were standing somewhere in Chicago that night, the first thing you would notice is how quickly everything begins to change. At first, it looks like a fire a few streets away. A glow in the distance, some smoke rising above rooftops. But within minutes, the situation becomes far more dangerous. The wind pushes the flames forward with incredible force. Burning embers lift into the air and drift across the city like glowing sparks in a storm. Some of those embers land on rooftops several blocks away. At first, a small flame appears on a wooden roof, then another, then another. Suddenly, fires are no longer confined to a single street. They are appearing everywhere. Entire rows of houses begin catching fire almost at the same time. Wooden fences carry flames through backyards. Barns filled with hay ignite instantly. The wooden sidewalks that run along many Chicago streets begin burning like long fuses, spreading fire block after block. People quickly realize the fire is moving faster than anyone expected, faster than wagons can travel, faster than firefighters can respond. Families rush into the streets carrying whatever they can grab: clothes, food, important documents. Children are pulled along through the smoke-filled roads. The sky turns darker as thick smoke fills the air. And somewhere ahead of you, beyond the next intersection, another building suddenly bursts into flames. At that moment, one terrifying thought becomes impossible to ignore. The fire is no longer something you can simply avoid. It is surrounding the city, and it is moving toward you. By midnight, the situation across Chicago has changed completely. What began as a fire in a single neighborhood has now turned into a citywide disaster. The streets fill with thousands of people trying to escape. Families rush out of their homes carrying whatever they can grab in a few seconds: blankets, clothing, small boxes of valuables, sometimes even furniture loaded onto handcarts. Horse wagons crowd the roads. Some drivers try to push through the chaos while others abandon their carts when the streets become impossible to navigate. The sound of the fire grows louder, a constant roaring in the distance, mixed with the cracking of burning wood and collapsing buildings. Smoke spreads through entire neighborhoods. Ash begins falling from the sky like dark snow. Visibility becomes worse with every minute. Firefighters struggle to move their equipment through the packed streets. Water pumps work constantly, but the flames keep advancing. Every gust of wind carries burning embers over rooftops and across blocks. Suddenly, a nearby building ignites, then another. People begin to panic as they realize the fire is no longer behind them. It is moving around them. Entire streets become traps as flames close in from multiple directions. Shouting fills the air. Children cry. Neighbors call out for missing family members. And in the growing darkness and smoke, the city of Chicago begins to look less like a place to live and more like a battlefield. By this point, the fire is no longer just a collection of burning buildings. It has become something far more dangerous, a firestorm. The heat, rising from thousands of burning structures, begins to change the air itself. Hot air shoots upward into the sky, pulling cooler air rapidly toward the flames. This creates powerful winds that feed the fire even more oxygen. Suddenly, the blaze begins moving with terrifying speed. Flames race down entire streets in minutes. Wooden rooftops ignite from falling embers before the main fire even reaches them. Windows shatter from the intense heat. Gas lamps explode. Warehouses filled with coal, lumber, and oil erupt into towering columns of fire. Witnesses later describe the sky glowing so bright that night looks like daytime. The roar of the fire becomes deafening, like a massive storm moving through the city. Some people say the flames leap across entire blocks as if the air itself is burning. Even natural barriers fail. When the fire reaches the Chicago River, many residents believe the water will finally stop it. But the wind carries burning debris across the river. Warehouses on the opposite bank ignite, and the fire continues spreading north. At this moment, Chicago is no longer fighting a fire. The entire city is inside one. By this point in the night, survival becomes the only thing that matters. The fire is no longer just spreading. It is hunting for fuel, and the entire city is made of it. If you were in Chicago that night, every direction would feel dangerous. The streets are packed with people trying to escape. Horse wagons jam the roads. Families carry whatever they can hold: blankets, children, small boxes of valuables. But moving through the city is painfully slow. Some roads are already blocked by collapsed buildings. Others are glowing with burning debris. And the wind keeps pushing the fire forward. For many residents, the only safe direction seems to be toward Lake Michigan. Thousands begin moving east toward the shoreline. The closer you get to the water, the more crowded it becomes. People gather along the beaches, hoping the lake will protect them from the heat. Some step into the cold water up to their knees. Others wade even deeper as sparks rain down from the sky. Behind them, Chicago continues to burn. Entire neighborhoods collapse into flames. Roofs cave in. Church towers fall. The heat is so intense that even standing near the water does not feel safe. But for thousands of people that night, the lake becomes the last place left to escape the fire. And as they watch the city burning behind them, many realize something terrifying. There is nothing left to return to. When the fire finally begins to fade, Chicago no longer looks like the city people remember. Where entire neighborhoods once stood, there are now only fields of ash, twisted metal, and blackened stone foundations. Streets that were once crowded with homes, shops, and warehouses are now silent and empty. More than 17,000 buildings have been destroyed. Nearly 100,000 residents, almost a third of the city's population, suddenly have no homes. Thousands of people gather along the shore of Lake Michigan or in open parks, exhausted after fleeing the flames. Families search through the ruins hoping to find anything that survived. A piece of furniture, a photograph, a tool. anything that can be saved from the destruction. The smell of smoke hangs over the city for days. Entire business districts have vanished. Churches, hotels, factories, and markets are gone. For a moment, it seems impossible that Chicago could ever recover from a disaster of this scale. But something remarkable begins to happen almost immediately. Even while the ruins are still smoking, people begin clearing debris from the streets. Temporary shelters appear, merchants reopen small stalls, workers start rebuilding, and within a few years, Chicago will rise again, larger, stronger, and no longer made almost entirely of wood. What you've just experienced is a reconstruction of the Great Chicago Fire of 1871 and what it might have been like to try to survive inside the burning city. The streets, buildings, and atmosphere shown in this video were recreated using AI reconstruction technology to visualize this historic disaster as realistically as possible.